for the purpose of presenting a bill. Mr. Stevens, you hold on because I don't mash your button because I don't know what I'm doing.
Thank you, Chairman. I move on House Resolution 1977 of the Committee to study horse racing in the state of Georgia.
You've heard an explanation what it is that extends the date some. Is there any on an existing study committee, and it extends the date to 12/31? Yes, sir. Okay. That's the bill. I need a motion. Any opposed? All right, we'll go back into the supplemental calendar portion of this meeting. On your desk, you've got two amendments. Mr. Lindsay, Mr. Hembry. Mr. Hembry, would you like to bear with me?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I'd like to offer the amendment to Senate Bill 469. The amendment simply deletes lines 18 through 57. In a general sense, this deletes Section 1 of the bill, which is the measure and the part of the bill that dealt with picketing. All the other sections would follow. Section 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, and 7 would stay in place.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Hembry, can you direct your attention to page 5 of the bill? You've stricken the Section 1, but it retains under Section 5 the conspiracy to commit trespass being a misdemeanor of a high and aggravated nature that can be a concurrent sentence. Can you tell us what the sentence would be for conspiracy to commit criminal trespass?
In an effort to get the measure passed, our efforts were to remove the language that dealt with picketing at private residences or picketing at any private residence for any reason. So therefore, we just moved Section 1 from the bill. If Section 1 doesn't exist, then it's my opinion that Section 5 would not be relevant. So it doesn't matter whether or not it stays.
May I ask a further question? We're creating a new crime here. We're creating a new provision. So what I would recommend is that if we're going to strike Section 1, you should also strike Section 5, because Section 5 does create a new crime. It says that conspiracy to commit criminal trespass, unlike other conspiracy charges under 16-4-8, are treated. If it's a misdemeanor, it's a misdemeanor. If it's a felony, it's a felony. This creates a misdemeanor of a high and aggravated nature, but doesn't set a penalty. And if we're going to remove Section 1, I would recommend that you also remove Section 5, as it would no longer be relevant.
I have not consulted with Senator Balfour. This is his bill on that matter. But if the lady wishes, I have no problem removing that section.
Thank you.
Mr. Roberts.
Chairman Hembry, so in other words, under your amendment, they can still come and picket our private residences if this bill passes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mr. Lindsay. There's another amendment.
Yes, Mr. Mr. Chairman. My amendment, the committee may recall there were certain exceptions carved out of the bill already in terms of educators and law enforcement officials not engaged or engaged in contracting or collective bargaining. That was already in the bill in two different places. That was in terms of a carve-out. Since we're already carving out in terms of the bill, and this was done in committee, for educators or law enforcement, I saw no reason to also not carve out to include firefighters in that exception. And given the similarity of their work to law enforcement officials in particular in terms of public employees.
Mr. Earhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It strikes me that possibly at the appropriate time I may offer a substitute to Representative Lindsay's amendment. It strikes me that we're going to set up a equal protection argument if we don't apply this to all collective bargaining units. If you're going to exempt firefighters, teachers, law enforcement personnel, why couldn't the CWA and the Teamsters make an argument that you're not treating them equally for their collective bargaining unit? I agree with the basic premise. I don't think you ought to be able to do these dues checkoffs for anybody, any collective bargaining unit. I'd like to suggest we just delete Section C in paragraph C in Section 4 and apply it to everybody. Law enforcement, teachers, and firefighters alike.
Mr. Lindsay.
And I realize I'm at an advantage over you, Representative Earhart, because I've got the book and you don't. So I know what's in the entire bill. But basically, the exclusion, if I may read it out in its entirety, would be any professional association whose membership is exclusively composed of educators, firefighters, or law enforcement officers not engaged or engaging in contracting or collective bargaining. Yeah, I know that's my point is that these aren't engaged in that kind of activity, and since the committee has already seen fit to carve out educators and law enforcement officials, I didn't see any reason to exclude firefighters from that carve out.
The minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lindsay, or to Mr. Hembry, is it not true that GAE is not composed entirely and exclusively of educators, but indeed includes other persons employed in the education field, and therefore they would not be covered by this carve-out? And the same thing is true for GFT. So I guess I'm wondering to whom this section would apply, because the largest professional associations are not exclusively composed of educators. They are composed of people in the education field, but not only of educators. And do we have a definition of what we mean by educator?
If I may, this was a carve-out specifically requested by GAE and Page, that they felt like that it would, that it would protect it. That's my understanding. I want to make sure that was my I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. It's my understanding in committee that this was language that was worked out with our various educator organizations. I may be wrong about that, but that was my understanding. And perhaps the chairman can speak to that.
That's correct. This language was requested by those groups, so we felt that was appropriate to place that, as well as the law enforcement, in this case the firefighters language.
Anyone else? Come on. Okay. Again, you've got two amendments. The first one's AM 213840, Mr. Hembry. Do I hear a move? Do I hear a second? All those opposed, raise your hand. Okay, those for that amendment, raise your hand. All right, then that amendment passes. Minority Leader.
With the permission of the author, I would also like to add that we strike lines 129 through 137, as this provision is no longer relevant given the striking of Section 1 Otherwise, we've created a crime without defining the penalties.
The author shakes his head yes. Do the line numbers.
Line 129 through 137 and renumber accordingly.
Nope. So you want to add to Mr. Hembry's separate amendment that strikes 129 through 137 and renumbers. Mr. Earhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me ask a question. 16 is the criminal code, and it says above on line 132, members of the committee, that a person who commits the offense of criminal trespass. Criminal trespass is defined in 16 currently, and shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. Can it be posited that lines 134 through 137 are anticipating that criminal trespass as a misdemeanor may not be a severe enough penalty for somebody who is actually criminally trespassing, as if they were in front of your house yelling at your children, doing things in a manner, and when they stepped onto your property, it's a misdemeanor for criminal trespass. Under this, in lines 134 to 137, the current definition of criminal trespass would be elevated from a misdemeanor to a misdemeanor of a high and aggravated nature. That's what this says.
Mr. Chairman, as the author of the amendment, Section 16-4-8 deals with the definition of what conspiracy to commit a crime is. So the definition of criminal trespass is found in 16-7-21. This language applies to, it only elevates the conspiracy to a misdemeanor of high and aggravated nature, but the actual commission of the crime remains just a misdemeanor. So you would actually have a higher penalty for thinking about it than you do for actually committing it. And so the point would be striking this language returns us to the underlying premise, which is that criminal trespass is a misdemeanor, conspiracy is a misdemeanor, and they would be treated under the relevant sections equally.
Mr. Earhart.
I don't read it like that, Mr. Chairman, and it says, if you look at line 135, and the completed crime, not just thinking about it, the completed crime of criminal trespass, in which event such separate crime of conspiracy shall be a misdemeanor of a high and aggravated nature. So if you read that conjunctively, you've got the completed crime of trespass is now a misdemeanor of a high and aggravated nature.
If I may again, 16-4-8.1 deals with the ability to be convicted of both crimes. So it's not about, my issue is an issue of penalty. 16-4-8.1 says you can be convicted of one and not the other. This is saying you can be convicted of both. But the point is, you're convicting someone with a penalty that is higher and undefined than the penalty for the underlying act. So if I criminal trespass, it's a misdemeanor. But to talk about it, whoever talked about it with me is now guilty of something that has a higher penalty than the actual commission of the crime. And that just seems to me to be incongruent with what we intend to do in this bill.
What is that noise? Ever whose phone that is? Kill it. All right, that's enough on this. Like those two. All right, I'm going to allow the minority leader to ask for her amendment to do away with 129 through 137. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Aye. Raise your hands. All those for that amendment, raise your hand. Okay, all those opposed to that amendment? That amendment passes. Mr. Lindsay.
Back to my humble amendment. Back to my amendment, Mr. Chairman. Basically, like I stated before, the committee has, in its infinite wisdom, has already carved out exceptions for educators and for law enforcement. I would ask that it be also include firefighters. That's all the amendment does.
Any questions of Mr. Lindsay? All those in favor of his amendment signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do an uncontested calendar. Hang with me here, y'all. We're going to do an uncontested calendar with H.R. 1977 and H.R. 1873, the two study committees. I've heard a move. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, now we've got 469. We have voted on one, and I haven't got an amendment number for the minority leader, but we'll write one up. We've got 3 amendments, and you've passed all of those. Or did we pass the second? Yes, we passed the second. All right, so now I need a move on SB 469. All those in favor? Aye. That's the calendar. I'm sorry. It's modified. It's modified structure, and it'll be on the calendar. We're done.